All right, welcome everybody tonight to the special meeting of the Ward 3 NPA. My name is Chris Hazley. I'm one of the steering committee members. So tonight we're fortunate to have Lieutenant Governor John Rodgers, who's come all the way up from Glover by way of Montpelier to give us an update about what's going on in the State House in Montpelier, and then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A here. So if you want to pass the mic around, we'll just have everybody kind of introduce themselves, your first name, what street you live on, and fun fact or what brought you here tonight, whatever works for you. So I guess we'll go to the left.
I'm Robert Bristow Johnson, and I don't live in Ward 3, I live in Ward 7.
I'm Romeo von Herman. I don't live in Ward 3 either. I live in Ward 6, but glad to be here because the one and only Lieutenant Governor is here, and I'm looking forward to voting for you. So, yes, sir, thank you.
I'm Bobby Sand. I split my time between Ward 3 and Windsor County.
Hi guys, Sean Silby. I live in Ward 5, but very happy to be here.
Allegra, where we live on North Ave, and we used to go to the joint NPA meeting when the whole North End was joined, so this is our first new meeting.
Patrick, and I've got these 4 guys.
Hi, I'm Jill Lesh. I live down the street at 40 College Street. That's Ward 3. Glad to be here and thank you.
All right, thank you. And John.
Mike. Hi, Mike. I live 2 blocks from here. I am aged and live in an elderly home. It's a HUD building with 65 apartments at Pine and College. And I've been there a decade. And I'm from Brooklyn. Charlie Nussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Charlie also helped do the publicity and was out pounding the pavement with me yesterday, putting up the posters.
Hi, I'm Evan. I live nearby in Ward 3 on Church Street. That's about it.
Hello. My name is Stephen Levon. I'm from Vietnam and Canada, and I live in South Burlington, but I'm going to be involved a lot in the Burlington politics in neighboring areas very soon. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adil. I stay right next door on College Street and Church Street intersection, and I'm a lawyer. I work here and I've been here since November now.
Great. I'm John Rodgers, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you all for being here. So first I wanted to share a little background. I grew up on a dairy farm in Glover, Vermont, and that's up in the Northeast Kingdom. And, excuse me, my family settled that farm in 1838, and I live in the house that my family built in 1840. And so my hope and dream is to pass that farm on to the next generation so it stays in the family. One of my passions is soil and growing food. And when we talk about climate change and resilience, the best thing we can do for the planet and for flood resilience is to build deep organic soil and grow more food. I don't believe in filling all our farm fields with solar panels. I totally agree with net metering, but solar panels should be near where you're going to use the energy, and they should be put on built infrastructure. When you build deep soil all around the state and you get these heavy rainstorms like we get now, instead of the water running off and making it down into the river valleys where it's flooding everything, it's able to soak into the ground because the more soil you have, the bigger sponge you have. I've been doing this work on my farm for several years, but I was fortunate enough to meet a guy named Abe Collins, who's doing a big project down in Rochester, Vermont, and he has built what they call a farmer's co-op, and all the farmers in that river valley are doing this deep soil work to see how much they can affect the flooding in that river valley. I totally believe in it. I also believe that we should do stuff more similar to what Vermonters did a few generations ago, which is grow more of our food here. Not sure if folks are aware of this or not, but dairy brings billions of dollars into the state because our milk goes out of state into the New England milk market. Billions of dollars come back. We have the potential to do that with all other types of agriculture. And if you think about it, when we go to the supermarket, start looking at where your produce is coming from. Our vegetables are coming from California and Mexico. One day I walked into Price Chopper and there's these beautiful red grapes on sale, organic red grapes, $1.99 a pound, I think. I pick them up. They were from South Africa. How do you get grapes here from South Africa for $2 a pound and make money? I don't know. But when we think about the carbon footprint of it, and we're trucking stuff from California, first off, we're exporting our money. And so the more we grow here, the more money we keep here. But we also have well over 100 million people within an 8-hour drive of here, which means we have the potential to feed New England and New York and New Jersey and bring money back here. And so in the legislature, you hear a lot of talk about 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. That's the conservation plan to conserve 30% of Vermont's land mass by 2030, 50% of Vermont's land mass by 2050. But you never hear them talk about the 30 by 30 that I think is really important. And that is New England has a goal of growing 30% of our food by 2030. We are nowhere near that goal. And if you look at New England, there's 2 states with potential to grow food. That's us and Maine. The rest of the states have very little farmland. And we literally have old dairy farms going fallow. We've got tons of young people who want to be in agriculture. And I truly believe that to do the best thing for Vermont, the best thing for the planet, we teach people how to build deep soil and grow more food here. So that's one of my passions. One of the other things that I talk about when I go around the state is getting more of our young people into trades. So I grew up on a dairy farm. I did a lot of different things. I worked in logging, I worked in manufacturing, but then I started building and I started apprenticing for a brick mason. And I started running my own business when I was in my early 20s, and I've been doing masonry ever since, and I still do stonework and excavation. But when I go onto a job, the majority of the people on the work crews are my age, not my kids' age. And so we've missed a whole generation. And so now, if you try to call somebody up to get somebody to come do a roof on your house or some plumbing or change some windows, it's really hard to find a contractor. And the majority of the contractors now are building the million and multi-million-dollar houses. They're not building the entry-level ranch that our kids can afford when they get out of high school or college. They're not building the affordable places for older people who live in a big house who want to downsize. And so we have a whole bunch of folks whose kids have moved out who are still living in a giant house that a family could move into if they had a reasonable place to go to, and we don't have those places. So if we can rebuild our trades workforce, we can do a couple of things. We can start building those houses, but what this state really needs to do is change our demographics. We're the second oldest state in the country, and if we don't change that trajectory, I feel that we're in serious trouble. And so when I go, I've been touring tech centers and a whole bunch of businesses. There's actually some private industry that has built a couple different trade academies. There's a bunch of businesses doing apprenticeships, and I'm committed to continuing to build those networks to try to get more kids to go into the trades, because a lot of kids don't want to go to college. They don't know what they want to study, and we've got to stop this habit of making kids go to college because that's the thing to do. And they come out with a degree in Greek mythology. nothing against Greek mythology, it's great, but can you get a job? And can you afford to live here and raise a family and live the American dream with that degree? And so totally into that. But the whole reason I got back into politics, so I served in the House of, I should go way back. My first elected position was the collector of delinquent tax in Glover, Vermont, really glamorous job. The delinquencies were like several years behind, and that's bad for the people that are delinquent. It's bad for the town. So I got elected to that, cleaned it up, got it current, and then got talked into running for the House of Representatives, served there for 8 years, 2 years off, ran for the Senate, served there for 8 years, really thought I was done public service, and then the property taxes went up 14% in 1 year. And I said, somebody has to get involved or my grandkids aren't going to be able to live here. Same age kind of group as your kids. So I'm worried about that future. We have to change our demographics, but we're not going to change our demographics if the property taxes stay as high as they are and housing prices stay as high as they are. So we've got to change that. So I got back into politics and ran for this office, and a lot of people will tell you that this is a ceremonial office, and that is only because those people weren't smart enough to use the platform. Because I have a chief of staff, there's 2 of us in the office. It's a running joke in the office. He's the chief of no staff because it's just him and me. But we are calling and emailing Vermonters and helping Vermonters every day. We are working with senators and representatives on legislation every day. We're working with the governor's office and his team every day, trying to work on affordability, trying to help people with problems. When they call up and say, hey, I got a problem with the tax department, they won't get back to me. I can get hold of somebody in the tax department and say, hey, you guys need to be more responsive. Why aren't you getting back to this guy? And they'll get a call. And so that's the kind of stuff I do in the office every day. And I think this is one of the greatest jobs I've ever had in my life because I get to help Vermonters every day. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to just be here and have a discussion. So open it up.
Any questions for the Lieutenant Governor?
Again, thank you for running, Lieutenant. You know, one of the things that always comes to mind living in Vermont is taxes. And I always think about, I mean, I'm in my early 40s now, and I'm like, do I really want to retire in Vermont? I mean, I look at people who live right now, who are retiring, who their Social Security benefits are being taxed, who they're, from what I hear, I don't know if it's true, their VA, they're being taxed from military when they retire from military. Okay, good. And so, and of course, property tax is high. There are quite a number of things that are high, especially in Chen County. And I'm like, oh my gosh, in 20, 30 years from now, if I really want to retire, number one, it's very cold during wintertime. And number 2, it's very expensive to buy a property because you get locked in for 30 years and the property tax goes high. I'm like, is it a viable place to stay? I mean, it's a very beautiful state, don't get me wrong. It's a very clean air, you know, and definitely it has potential to do farming and a lot of stuff here to produce your food directly. But when it comes to quality of life and living here in the long term, when you are like a very tender age, is it viable for young adults to turn into their tender age to live here and then they get, you know, taxed from all the way 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s? It's like, how good is that really in the long term? So it really worries me as a person living here. So thank you.
I guess you needed to answer.
Yes, Romeo, I mean, a lot of great points there. And that's one of the reasons I got involved because, so if we look at it, we have currently the highest healthcare insurance cost in the country. We're the 3rd highest overall tax burden. We have the 10th highest electricity cost. And the list goes on. So we're a very expensive place to live, and we're not one of the highest income potential states, right? So that math doesn't work well. So that's what I'm trying to change. One of the disappointing things about this year's legislative session is after the last election, everybody, no matter what party they were from, they said, oh, we heard the voters, we've got to do something about property tax. Well, here we are, second year of the biennium, almost ready to finish, and they've done nothing on the property tax. The Education Committee in both the House and the Senate passed bills that really don't bend the curve at all. They're working on a proposal right now that supposedly might start bending the property tax curve in 4 years. Here's my worry. Property taxes have gone up 40% in 5 years. They went up another 10% this year. We're buying it down. But that buy down only gets rid of that 10% this year. That 10% growth is still there. So next year, if we don't have the money to buy it down, our property taxes go up another 10% plus whatever next year's increase is. So I'm afraid that next year could be a serious cliff, could be 15, 16% increase in our property taxes. And their proposal isn't going to start bending the curve for at least 3 or 4 years. In my view, that's a failure. That is not living up to what Vermonters asked us to do. So I hear stories in my office every day. One of the ones that has really been the most impactful for me is a guy called me up. He was an engineer with the state of Vermont. So he made good money, good pension. His wife worked for the federal government, made good money, good pension. He said, we can't afford to live here. Now, if a couple like that can't afford to live here, I'm pretty worried about the rest of us. And I hear these stories over and over. I hear from families that have kids in school that say, when my kids are out of school, we're gone. And I just hear way too many of those stories. I talked with a young woman. She's a member of the Young Business Leaders, part of the Chamber of Commerce here in Chittenden County. And she's early 30s, said she makes 6 figures and can't afford a house. Those are all troubling signs. And so that's why I got back involved. I think we need to make sure that everybody is paying attention to how their legislators vote, because so many times I hear from people, oh, I met my representative or I met my senator and they seemed like nice people, so I vote for them. Well, most of the people in the State House are nice people and they mean well, but that doesn't mean they're voting for your benefit. And I'll tell you, and I don't know how many of you know my political background, but I served in the House for 8 years and the Senate for 8 years as a Democrat, and I just left the Democratic Party when I ran for this position, mainly because Governor Scott is a Republican and he's the only one talking about working class issues. And the Democrats, from my perspective, the Democrats in the State House have forgotten the working class. And their policies are hurting the working class. They've been in control of the legislature for 20 years now. I was with them for 16 of those years trying to make it so that the working class could afford to live here, and it kept getting worse and worse. So I left the party. I wish I didn't have to be part of any party. I'm not a partisan person. I work for all Vermonters. But from here on out, I'm going to run with the governor as a Republican and try to work to make Vermont more affordable.
Thank you. Like a good lawyer, 3 questions for you. The first is, you mentioned your grandchildren. How do I get some? Second is, how do you balance expanded deep soil with the need for more housing in the state?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we do need housing. Personally, I don't think we need as much as some people say we need, but we do need housing. And when I say we need housing, one of the problems is most of the housing that we're building is for the high end. They're the houses that our kids and grandkids can't afford, that the older people who want to move out of a big house can't afford. So it's kind of a tough dynamic, because a contractor can make more building a $5 million house, right? So we've got to change that somehow. But there is plenty of land in Vermont. And what I don't want to see is our prime agricultural land used up. I don't want to see solar panels on it. I don't want to see houses in it. We look at some of the best agricultural land in the state here in Chittenden County has housing on it. It is what it is. It's not going away and it's not changing. But I think we have to be super careful going forward because, Dartmouth, a couple of professors over there just did a study and said, the way the weather is going, we are going to get more really hard rains, right? So we're going to get events like we've seen in the last few years where we get 3 inches in a day and then it doesn't rain for a month. We got to be ready for those rains. And we can't do that resilience work in the river valleys. That resilience work has to happen everywhere. And that's why I say, I think one of the answers is to do better at the top of the hills, do better on all the agricultural land. We also have to restore wetlands and do all that work down below too. But for me, it's super important. And, I don't think people understand the fact that clean water and clean soil are 2 of the most valuable things on earth. Because I don't care how many stacks of gold or how many wads of cash you have, if you got no food, they don't make a very good soup.
Next.
I don't mean to suck up the oxygen in the room, but so if you want to be a first-time home buyer, and I think this applies both at a state level and federal level, I noticed that there are some stuff that is available to you, but there's a caveat associated with it. Like you have to make a certain income, and it has to be below $100,000. And knowing that Vermont is a very expensive place to live in, and if you make anything below $100,000, you're still out of luck. And you have to go through a bank and try to get a loan, and you're pretty much locked in forever, and you're going to be paying high interest. And I'm wondering, is there anything that the state is exploring to help out first-time home buyers? Thank you.
There's been a lot of discussion about that. I truthfully don't know the answer to it. One of our big problems in the state of Vermont is education is literally sucking the money away from just about everything we want to do. So we think about the education property tax for any of us that pay that. It's very, very expensive, but that's only a portion of ed spending. There's part of the purchase and use, there's part of the rooms and meals, and there's a massive transfer from the general fund. So if we actually get our education spending under control, then we're going to have money to explore programs like that. There's a lot of really good programs that don't get any money because right now there is no money left, and we're actually in our transportation fund, we're in serious trouble. We are barely coming up with the money to match the federal money. So like on highways, it's 10% state, we get a 90% federal match. So if we can't come up with that money, we're losing many, many millions. On state roads, it's 20% state, 80% federal, same. And so because our gas tax revenues have dropped off so dramatically, we are finding it hard to come up with enough money to match the federal money, which means we're not going to do as much paving, which means our roads are going to be worse, which means we're going to beat our cars up and have to buy more cars and visit the shop more often and spend more money on the maintenance of our cars. So that purchase and use tax on cars was meant to go to the transportation fund, but a portion of that is now going to the ed fund because the legislature came up short a few years ago and said, well, where else can we get some money? So I think until we get education structurally changed, there's not going to be any extra money for anything.
Anybody have anything they want to share? Questions? Sure.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what impact the federal reclassification of cannabis might have on Vermont's cannabis market.
That's a good question. I'm really hopeful that it has a positive effect, because currently cannabis businesses are treated very differently from other businesses. You can't depreciate any of your equipment. And so anybody who's in the cannabis business is really getting beat up badly on taxes because there's no deductions. They're getting beat up on banking because the few credit unions that will do business are charging you an arm and a leg to be able to do business. They're getting beat up on insurance because there are very few insurance companies that will insure it. So a whole bunch of people think in the general public, oh, all these guys in the cannabis business are making money hand over fist. The fact is, hundreds of them have already gone out of business. Everybody that I talk to in the business that are really good business people are keeping the bills paid, but that's it. And I talked to one guy, has a business up in Hardwick, and he is outstanding at what he does. And he said he just dipped into his 401k and drained that to keep his business floating. So we need that relief if we're actually going to have a healthy cannabis market.
So I'll just jump in here. One of the things that we've here in Burlington is talking about affordable housing, and here in Burlington for the last 25, 30, 40 years, how affordable housing has been like, how can we increase the supply of rental housing to get people into that? And now we're at a point here where we have somewhere between 60 to 70% of the city is renters, and starter homes are outside the realm of affordability for many, many people. And you take that in, we got a beautiful brand new high school, but now we're looking at a declining enrollment situation for the fall of 100, I think, to 125 students, because the school district was largely kept afloat by new Americans that were coming in. But of course, federal policies changed, so we don't have as many folks coming in. And I think what's happening is, you have younger people, and you get to the point you want to start a family and get a home or whatever. There's no starter homes here. And it's like, you want to have a house with a backyard with a swing set and kick the soccer ball around, or, have a sandbox. People are looking outside of Burlington because that's where they can find something that they can afford. And it just seems like, we've kind of been pursuing the wrong goal. It shouldn't be about affordable housing. It should be about affordable home ownership, because at the end of the day, you want to bring people out of poverty. You got to build generational wealth. And you can't do that as a renter. You're just lining someone else's pocket, as my wife would, likes to point out. And yeah, so it's like, but if you get someone into a house, like, they're going to have something they can pass on to their kids and have that. And we really don't have that there. So like, what can we do at the state level to really make like starter homes affordable? Because I talk to young people in their 20s and 30s, and they say, particularly folks in the hospitality industry, the restaurants, like, we can't afford to stay in Burlington even if we want to stay. And they're like, we're looking down in Moncton or up in Fairfax, because that's how far outside of Burlington we have to go to hit the zone of affordability where we can live. And you look at the prices here, I think the standard definition of affordable housing is like 1/3 of your pay. And I don't remember if it's gross or after tax, but you do the math on rent here, and I'll be conservative and say it's $1,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. That comes out to be roughly $17,000 a year. Multiply that by 3, that's what, $51,000? I mean, how many people do you know that are bartenders, cooks, servers, dishwashers making that kind of money? They're not. They're living 2 to 3 people in an apartment because that's what they can afford. And then, you wonder why things are what they are. So I'm just wondering, like, what can be done here at the state level to actually encourage and make home ownership affordable to everyday people?
Yeah, that's something I talk about a lot, Chris. So when the folks in the State House discuss housing, a lot of times they're discussing affordable apartments, which is great for people who want to live in apartments. But I think most people, just like you said, they want to have a home because that's how you build equity. And, all this emphasis on building more big apartments with lots of units, all that does is concentrate the wealth, right, to one person or to one business. We want families to be able to build that equity and that intergenerational wealth. So one thing that a Burlington resident told me one day, and that's why I like coming downtown, and any of you, please feel free to share ideas and things you see, thoughts with me as well, not just questions, but I like to hear from people, because he told me something that I hadn't thought about at all. He said his street had turned from a street that was all families into a street that is rentals for college students. Now that makes it so families can't buy a house. And that's a problem because we've got, business owners that have cash, that when something goes on the market, they can go bang and buy that house for cash, right? Where most people have to go, oh, I'd like to buy it, but I gotta go to the bank, I gotta get a loan, it's gonna take a while. And so the regular person is at a disadvantage. And I really think that's unfortunate when you have a street that changes from all families into college rentals. And so that's one thing the legislature is talking about with taxing non-residents differently. I've got very mixed feelings about that because, number one, I think everybody is overtaxed, both residents and non-residents. But one of the problems we have here in this state is 25% of our homes are owned by people who don't live in them. That's the highest level in the country. So that means second homeowners that are only here off and on. That means people who do long-term rentals, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, but 25% of our homes. That is massive. And those homes are now off the market for people who want to buy those affordable homes. So I don't know if there's things that cities can do independently. It definitely needs to be, I know it has been a discussion. I don't think there's an easy answer because I haven't heard an answer yet. But I think it's something that needs to be addressed because I would love to see these city streets turned back into family houses.
Thanks.
I appreciate the recognition around home ownership and what that does for wealth. But in the meantime, there are a number of families here in our city who don't have the means and won't have the means for some period of time. And so home ownership is not in the realm of possibility. So how do we then protect those people who are in a rental situation so that their tenure can be similar to what people experience in home ownership? So it doesn't matter to me if you're in a neighborhood, whether you're renting or you own your home. It is important to build that social capital, to have neighbors that stay with you, to have kids that don't have to move away into different communities around here, to have that stability whether you own your home or not. And so here in the city of Burlington, a couple of years ago, we did pass a home rule petition or a change to our charter that would allow for a just cause eviction ordinance. That passed overwhelmingly here with the voters, and it was sent to Montpelier. And the legislature there, many of whom own the homes that they rent to others, did not take that up. And regardless of what you think about the policy itself, I think the ability for one community to determine its own, sets of policies based on their own beliefs is really important. And so can you speak to how we at the state level actually do what some cities have already done and enable those communities to determine how things should work within their own communities so that there is more stability in the housing market, not just for homeowners, but for those who have no hope of moving into that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And when I was talking about that street that has become all college kids, I think if those rentals were rented to families and it still felt like a family neighborhood, that would be totally different. I have always been a strong supporter of local control because I think that cities and towns know what's best for their residents. And so, you know, for the most part, I've always supported that. And it's actually a little, always been a little strange to me ever since I got involved in government that we still approve city charter changes. So, generally, those charter changes don't get changed a whole lot, and I'm not exactly sure why that one did. I mean, I wasn't in the committee process, but certainly understand where you're coming from and want you to know that I support local control. And, you know, I think there are things the city can do to help keep those neighborhoods, family neighborhoods, and I think that's real important.
So I guess one thing about the street up the hill that's turning into a college rental market. One of the problems that this town has to deal with is with a university system that is different than any land-grant university I've ever seen. I grew up in another small state, same population, approximately 600,000, but we had two flagship campuses. We had the North Dakota State University and the University of North Dakota. But one thing that was clear was that the state government owned those universities. The state government ran those universities. The state government had sovereignty over policy about that. And we had a thing called the State Board of Higher Education, and they were appointed by the legislature and the governor. It was not a private board of trustees. And sure, the university had power, but it was derived from the state. And if there was some problem that Grand Forks was having with the University of North Dakota, eventually it would find its way, that problem would find its way to Bismarck, and it would get slugged out. And, you know, maybe it wouldn't always get resolved in favor of the city, but at least the legislature was seeing that and could do something about that. But here, we got a problem. And I wonder how Balo feels about that, because I mean, you're in the city council, and you got to mess with those guys that don't build housing, and don't build student housing, and I mean, it's not so bad for me. I'm up in the sticks, but here in the old North End, that's what's driving the price, as you said, and driving the families.
That's a great point, and that's something I've been talking about for a few years, and I think, you know, like you said, we don't have much power over UVM, but we've got the power of suggestion, and I really believe that if they were doing better with student housing, we wouldn't have those streets getting bought up and filled with college students.
State of Vermont take control of their land-grant colleges?
I don't think so. We got a lawyer in the room. No, I don't think.
Thank you. So even back when I was a student, they referred to certain neighborhoods in Burlington as quote unquote student ghettos. So it has been a long-term issue where as the enrollment increased. And despite the many ways that sometimes our council doesn't agree on certain things, the one thing our council agreed upon was prior to Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanek becoming elected, the last time the MOU was discussed with UVM, we didn't come to an agreement because they weren't willing to disclose their enrollment numbers. And not that it's the fault of the college students, but the over-enrollments, the forced triples, the deferred maintenance. Many of you, I'm sure, heard the council's dealing with that, where students weren't getting deferred maintenance issues. I walked into multiple dorms, multiple bathrooms with mold everywhere. It was very disconcerting. So that it remains a concern. I have one quick statement or comment and then a question regarding knowing how many second homes are vacant in our state. Our state government needs to tax these people, period, full stop. They need to disincentivize this behavior, period, full stop. This idea that those that in the top 1%, 5% can't pay more is simply wrong, and it doesn't reflect the realities that we are seeing. And until we have the political courage to take bold steps like that, people were scared of Mondami, but he's like making certain things work. You know, what was the fancy word, the pret-a-porters or whatever there was that are taxing the one. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars these units are worth. And so those people can afford a little bit more. So we really have to take an honest look at that. These are people who don't live here, a lot of them. And we have one of the highest homeless rates in the country. It becomes a morality issue as well in terms of how we take care of our people. My question would be, there's no picture of Governor Scott having fun in Burlington. He seems to dislike us quite a bit. There was the famous press conference with Jen Morrison, where they just really degraded the city. Chittenden County is the economic driver for the state. Burlington is the economic driver for Chittenden County. Quite frankly, where's the respect? There's this idea that the politics affect the issues that we have. Meanwhile, St. Albans, hardly a bastion of progressive politics, has issues with drug trafficking, has issues with homeless people, Newport, Barry, Rutland, Brattleboro. Yet somehow we're dismissed. When he did finally come and he did sit down with the mayor and he sat down with Chief Burke, working with Sarah George, and they did the accountability court, we were able to crush the backlog. We can accomplish more, but treating us so differently, having such disdain for us, what does that really accomplish, and how can we change that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. And I've actually, from the time I started campaigning for this office, I've come downtown quite a bit. I've talked with a bunch of the business owners, and it was amazing to me to hear from business owners. They told me they'd never seen a lieutenant governor down here before, and they never saw the governor down here, and I was a little surprised by all of it. I believe that Burlington is Vermont's city, and so, I live an hour, 45 minutes from here, but when we want to go to the city, we come here, and I think a lot of Vermont does that. Unfortunately, things got pretty bad here with the drug stuff and the homeless stuff, and unfortunately, because you guys have so many services, you're like a magnet, so you get other communities' problems coming here. I totally understand that. For me, it feels like since the state police presence and the accountability court, and I'm talking with business owners, I think everybody's feeling like we're turning the corner. And so one of the things that I tell people when I'm out and about, because when I was campaigning, one of the things that really disturbed me was the number of people who said I don't go to Burlington anymore. And I think that narrative of the problems got focused on, and nobody was focusing on the positive things that are still here, all the great restaurants, all the great shops, all the great people. And so I grow sunflowers on my farm, and last summer, I don't know if you heard about it, but I picked like several hundred sunflowers and came downtown and walked around just giving out bouquets of sunflowers, going into businesses and just, trying to add some positivity. And I think that's what we really need to focus on. And that's one of the reasons I'm here, because I want to see this turnaround continue. We're headed in the right direction. We've got a long ways to go. But I also, when I'm out talking to people, I say, well, we'll never overcome the darkness if we don't bring light. And so that's why I'm here listening to people's concerns, and that's why I'll keep visiting. I'll keep talking with business owners, and happy to do anything I can. And my office is always open. If you've got ideas of how I can help, or you got issues you want to talk to, I'd encourage you to please reach out. I'm always happy to come down and do anything like this and talk with anybody that wants to talk.
Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Charlie.
I could go on about a few things. Yes, I can get very loud also. I try and hit a happy medium. Happy medium, an excellent band name. I'm from Brooklyn. I lived in New York until '84 and moved up here. In '84, it was already this bad in New York. So I have a different perspective on it than most people. I mean, a gentleman came up behind me and ran into me on a spacious sidewalk, and he growled in my face, "Get off the fucking sidewalk." He said that word a lot louder. And because I'm from where I'm from, I was not intimidated at all. And he just kept glaring at me as he walked away, and I said, "Fuck you, you get off the fucking sidewalk." And I get along with the people from the park. I just go, "Hey." I mean, people often can't afford ethics. It's great to be able to afford ethics, and some people cannot. They just, it's out of their league. It's a step away. Now, I live on College Street, and my building is subsidized housing. I pay 30% of my income, which is now Social Security. I pay 30% of it for rent. When I lived in Colchester and unemployment was running out and I couldn't find a job, it seems when you're old, the HR system has developed partly through software. If you say, "I have a lot of experience," it will say, "This guy's old." They think we're racehorses, and that when we get old, it's mostly gone. And they don't want to, they don't want to buy a bottle that's only got this much left in it. They don't understand that the guy who's 20 and eager will move to Colorado next year and hopefully give notice before. But down the street from me is a large building from the 80s, I think. It was a flat, nothing, there was urban renewal, as you know. I live on the verge of urban renewal. My building is from 1912, and it was the Crystal Candy and Confectionery Company. They were very successful. It was funded by the first empty sleeve to return from the Civil War. They used to call a guy who lost an arm in the war an empty sleeve. And Urban Woodbury was that man, and he was very successful. He became governor in 1895. But our building is great because it was a factory. The floors are a foot thick because they had machinery on them. We don't hear our neighbors. There are luxury apartments that are plywood, sheetrock, 4 inches of air, and a piece of sheetrock. And that's your wall. And the people next door sound like they're in your place. They have to stop building things like that. Everybody wants a house, partly because they don't want to hear their neighbors all the time. And I am lucky in that I have that. But I'm not sure how the walls are in it, but down the second half of the block toward the beautiful lake is a new building where people pay a whole lot to live. And I see windows lit up when people are home. And in the summer, many, many windows are lit up at night. And in the winter, out of, say, 15 or 20 apartments that are visible, about 5 are lit up all winter. Down in New York, Park Avenue used to be full of, people with fur coats and taxis and limos. And now they are investments for Russian and Chinese. And New York is finally getting around to putting a tax on owning a place you don't live in. They're finally getting to that. But here we have what the estimates go anywhere from 10 to 100 millionaires in town. And when they say the median income is $60,000, it's like saying the average American family has 2.2 kids or 2.5 kids. I can't remember which, but there is no family with 2.5 kids. There is no median income of $60,000. And so everyone in the room is thinking, well, that's funny, I make $30,000 and I need affordable housing. And the affordable housing is not affordable. $1,200 for a studio is considered affordable housing. No one who's not selling it agrees. They think $600 is affordable housing. When I lived out in 40th and Allen in Colchester, I spent 80% of my income on a place to live and utilities. Impossible. And that's why I went bankrupt, which turned out to be a great thing for me. I got rid of the debt that had accumulated since I moved up from Montpelier, because there was no work down there, and there was work here. But it is very difficult for people to work here and live here. And, well, Jane Jacobs, who you know, I'm sure, Jane Jacobs wrote The Life and Death of American Cities. And she said, a lively city is completely different from what planners envision. And it's crowded, and it's got stores that watch the street during the day, and people who live up above them who watch the street at night. And therefore it is safe. And now you have areas, we have neighborhoods which are chiefly parking lots at night. And this is not safe. This is not good. Cars dominate, and everyone wants a driveway, everyone wants a parking spot. People, affordable housing. Jane Jacobs said that you can't build affordable housing because they're still paying off the bank. And so all that happens is chain stores and people who can afford to live there, and they may not be millionaires, but they don't make enough to qualify for the affordable housing. So, yeah. Yes, that's why I said I had three things.
One of the things we have been doing is trying to build more permanently affordable housing like yours, because that's what people need, and especially if they're ever going to be able to save up enough money to try to get something of their own. The problem is it's extremely expensive to build that, so it has been very slow progress. But we are working on it and we are making progress. So the last figures I heard, it's over $600,000 a unit to build permanently affordable housing. And that's kind of an oxymoron because $600,000 a unit doesn't sound affordable, but part of that cost is to keep it permanently affordable. And that is essential, to keep it permanently affordable. So the upfront cost is expensive, so it is slow, but there has been some good work done in the state. I think a couple of you touched on the higher taxes. That is a discussion currently, higher taxes on people who don't live in the houses. The one concern that I have, and I talked with a gentleman a little earlier this evening, he has a hunting camp that's been in his family for years. He says, am I gonna get taxed because that's my second home? He said, it's not a home, it's a camp. And so I know that because I know a lot of people. I myself have a funky little camp that was built in the late 1800s. And I know a lot of Vermonters do, because they don't take vacations and they don't travel and they don't do a lot of things because they have that little getaway. And I don't want to see those folks treated the same way as the wealthy person that lives in New Jersey or Boston or goes to Florida. And so what I'm hoping is that they can make a distinguishment between what is a second home and what is a seasonal camp. But there definitely are people who can afford more. From my perspective, everybody's property taxes are too darn high, and we need to try to address that, or we're never going to get to a place where people can have affordable housing, because whether you are buying or renting, those property taxes are adding to your cost of living.
And I'm going to be your brave soul now. All right, so I'm going to say something about the affordable housing, and then I'm going to bounce off to something else. But Vermont definitely does need to find a way to manage that, because we are losing our young working force, and that is not helping Vermont long-term wise. And, thinking back, because I'm coming up from North Carolina, I was paying for rent at one point, $800 for a 2-bathroom, living room, balcony, and it was half a home, and I paid $800. This is what we're losing our young working force to. So if we don't find a way to compete against that, we're going to continue to dig a hole in Vermont that's burying us. And we're not doing it ourselves any favors. So we need to start looking at other states' models of how are they doing it and what are we doing wrong? Because we're failing at something. On a different note, education, because that's been on the table now for a couple of years and doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And definitely seems to be a contentious topic in Montpelier. And now it seems to be well, it's going to be voluntary. So what's going on?
Yeah, so education has been one big disappointment for me in the State House because everybody after the 24 election said, okay, we heard the voters, we have to do something. The Senate and the House Education Committee passed bills that really did very, very little to bend the curve on property tax. So disappointing. There's some backroom deals going on right now, and there's supposed to be something new out in the next couple days. But even from what I understand, that agreement, the best case scenario is it's not going to bend the curve on our property taxes for 3 or 4 years. And so at the current rate, it's gone up 40% in the last 5 years. It's 10% increase this year, but we're buying it down. But that 10% doesn't go away. Next year, that's going to mean it's gone up 50% in 6 or 7 years, right? Plus whatever it does go up. So I am scared to death about that. And my personal opinion is, back when I was in the Senate, and well, it was when they were passing Act 46, I drafted an amendment to deal with high spending towns, and they didn't accept it. This has been a problem that a lot of us have seen coming for a long time, and they don't have the courage. We have the same problem with healthcare. We saw healthcare costs growing and growing. UVM was charging some of the highest healthcare prices for procedures in the entire country. We come to find out that UVM Healthcare Network has 3 hospitals in New York that were losing money, so they were propping it up with this one. So Vermonters are paying extra to prop up hospitals in New York. That drove the cost of insurance up because insurance had to cover those high costs. So a representative from Blue Cross came into my office and showed me a fee scale for MRIs. I think UVM was $6,500 and Open MRI was $2,500. Open MRI is a for-profit business, so you know they're making money at $2,500. Why is UVM $6,500? And so, from my perspective, the legislature's lack of courage has gotten us here. And unfortunately, when it came down to getting stuff done on education, they lost their courage again. You know, I think I said it earlier, everybody needs to pay attention to how their legislators vote, because they're in campaign season, they'll talk a great story, and they're nice people, they mean well, but some of them don't have the courage to do the job. Being a leader is hard. It takes tough decisions, and I haven't seen it. I have not seen the courage in the last 2 years, and unfortunately, they are not going to bend the curve. And education currently is sucking so much money out of everything else. If it wasn't sucking so much out of the general fund, we'd have more to put into affordable housing. We'd have more to put into our roads and bridges and other important programs. But right now, we are taking other taxes that used to go to transportation and to the general fund and other places, and they're going into education because the cost is growing so much, even beyond what we're paying in taxes. So I attribute it to a lack of courage in the leadership in the legislature, and I think people need to, first off, we need to make sure more people get out and vote, especially in the primaries. Traditionally, primaries, 20% of the electorate come out. In some districts, the primary is the election. Here in Burlington, in a lot of the elections down here, the primary is going to tell you who is going to go to serve in the State House. Super important. People need to be involved. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We've got to get people involved. They've got to hold their legislators accountable. They've got to elect people that have courage.
Thank you. It's in two parts. One, I understand how education is very important, and yet it takes most of the money out of the state to be spent on. And I'm wondering, just from the education perspective, the amount of money that is being spent on, where is that really going to specifically? On the other hand, not relating to education, Vermont is considered a sanctuary state, I believe. And recently, as you watched it, there's been No King rallies and the ICE situation where people are getting in federal officers' faces and causing a lot of trouble, especially inside Burlington. And from your perspective, having a front row seat in Montpelier, I was wondering what is the state doing to curb and almost like discourage people from misbehaving. Of course, you have the First Amendment right to speak up your mind freely and redress the government of the day and so on and so forth, whatever issues that's bothering you. But in the way and the conduct and the tenor and the tone that is being done is very unbecoming. And that is causing a lot of danger for federal officers. And knowing that Vermont is a sanctuary state, I'm wondering, from your perspective, having front row seat in Montpelier, where do you think we are today? And I know Tom Holman was here recently. I don't know if you were part of the conversation when he came to see city leadership or like law enforcement and the governor and so on and so forth. If you could tell us anything to that effect, thank you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's super important to protect people's First Amendment and the right to peacefully protest, but we also have to hold people accountable when they cross that line. In talking with some of the law enforcement, that day, tires got slashed on law enforcement tires, windows got broke out of cars. That kind of stuff is not acceptable, and those people need to be held accountable. And I know they were trying to review all the footage and try to find out who was doing those things that violate the law. Unfortunately, the federal administration has not handled any of this stuff well. Targeting people because of their country of origin is absolutely wrong. I think if they were targeting criminals, I think, if they did it by the law, I think everybody would be fine. But targeting people because of the color of their skin or because of the country that they're from is not okay. And, I talk with my farmers a lot, and I had one farmer tell me, if they come and pick up the Mexican workers here on my farm, he said, my cows are going down the road the next day. I can't do it without them. And so these folks are being punished because we have a broken immigration system and we have a broken Congress who haven't fixed it. We need these workers, and we just need to give them a path to be here, whether it's some sort of worker visa, temporary visa. I don't know what it is, but our agricultural sector would collapse without migrant workers. And so it's just super unfortunate how they're going about it. The federal delegation, not our delegation, the federal administration is just destroying communities. And the same with that whole episode didn't need to happen that way. Trying to chase somebody down in an automobile, endangered tons of people, and then the right person wasn't even there. So just real sloppy work. But we also have to make sure that the folks that do go out and protest are following the law.
Thank you for those comments. I would just want to respond with my concern. I have a public safety background before I ran and was elected to city council. I was a police commissioner. What I was concerned about, and what the fear was in the community, was people have been seeing how lawless ICE has become. They are not following the rule of law. No one is out here supporting illegal immigration. But we need to protect people who are, quote unquote, doing things the right way. Like, people are being arrested at court as they show up for their hearings as part of their process. And some people are also being punished for their opinions about the genocide in Gaza. What I would like to see from Vermont State Police, from South Burlington Police, and hopefully from Burlington Police, is an honest conversation about the fact that nobody looked at the warrant. That was a violation of FIP, fair and impartial policing. Nobody looked at the warrant. They made an assumption when we had plenty of knowledge and examples of how ICE has been operating. I think that's a legitimate concern. And for the people who showed up who didn't view themselves as protesters, and I am not condoning any bad behavior on the part of a handful of people, not at all. But there were people who showed up knowing the tactics that ICE uses and felt they were there to protect people. If someone had said, okay, if we're gonna cooperate with you, ICE, we need to look at the warrant, and we can arrange for someone to go into the house, because there are people there that would have done it, to verify and identify who is in the house, and if they weren't on the warrant, have them escorted out safely. That could have happened, and the fact that Vermont State Police doesn't want to talk about it, and South Burlington Police didn't want to talk about it, yet they're ICE this, ICE that, they're incompetent, it was unnecessary. I think that's what the governor said, I'm not sure, but even the governor was like, none of this was okay, but nobody looked at the warrant. So I do believe that that discussion needs to be had, because what happens next time, right? And to your point, I know we have like the apple orchards have a program, and they bring up, so we have people here that are here legally, and are working towards a path, and it would collapse. It's collapsing agriculture across the country, as well as construction and other things. So I just wanted to say that, and I hope you can take that back, talk to Jim Morrison, and have that consideration. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's an excellent point. And I do know that our state police tried to talk them out of doing it, and they, of course, wouldn't listen. And I think one of the problems is they have been hiring so quickly. I don't think half the people with ICE have had the proper training. And so I think the point about the warrant is real important, because if it said a person's name who wasn't in there, then they shouldn't have gone in. And it is unfortunate that they arrested people that they shouldn't have arrested, and it's happening all around the country, and it's really disturbing. And I have talked with people who have lived here for many, many years, but came from other countries and have brown skin, who now carry their passports with them. And that is just unbelievable, that in this day and age, people who've been here for 40 years fear being arrested by our federal government. It's totally unacceptable. And there has been a lot of work done on that in the legislature. There is a bill that just went through the Senate. I believe it will make it to the governor's desk, that protects people in courts and schools and several state buildings. There's a bunch of places where there will now be protected status, and ICE won't be able to go in. But no, I blame it totally on the federal government. And quite frankly, at one point, when Biden was still president, there was a deal to try to actually make some improvements in the immigration system, and Trump told all the Republicans to vote against it, and they did. And basically, the Republicans in Congress have given up all of their power to Trump, and quite frankly, I think there is a lot of cowardice there, and they were elected to be leaders, and we actually have heard of some people. The governor of Oklahoma actually spoke up and said, leave our immigrants alone. our agriculture needs these people. Can you please stop? And I think we all need to say that. And construction is the same. And I talk with several contractors who say, you know, all the folks that are doing our sheetrocking and painting now are mostly immigrants. We can't keep building without these people. And it's the same thing the farmers are saying. So it's unfortunate, and we'll do everything I'll do everything I can. You know, when the ICE raided the farm, I think it was up in Richford, and picked up 8 Mexican farm workers. Myself and my chief of staff went to visit with Migrant Justice and said, you know, how can we help? And they said, well, sometimes if leaders in a community show support, then the judges will, you know, give that some weight. And so I drafted a letter of support. I got 29 out of 30 senators to sign that, and we gave it to Migrant Justice, and a couple of them got deported, but we were able to keep some of them here, and they got to go back to the farm. So, you know, that's the kind of thing I can do and have been doing to try to help all I can, but it doesn't get rid of the fear of those folks who are valuable parts of our community have every day because of what's going on.
So we are coming up on the 8:20 time mark, which is officially the start of our public forum. So if there's anyone that has any comments they'd like to do for public forum, we can pivot to that, or we can continue with the Q&A. So you have public forum comments? Okay. We'll pivot there. I'll just make a parting comment on the follow-up what Councilor Grant said about UVM. I think one thing the legislature could do is when, you know, the Burlington reps come along and say, hey, you know, want to introduce a bill to cap enrollment. That would be helpful, because it wasn't until my own stepson went to the university that we learned that once he's in the 3rd, 4th year, they don't even have the option to live on campus even if they want to, and that's putting pressure on our neighborhoods. And there's entire neighborhoods that 30, 40 years ago were filled with families. And you know what we have now, in the words of one UVM student, is a form of modern-day feudalism, where you have a small number of landlords owning, you know, all of it, and 60 to 70% of the cities are renting. So on that note, I'll pass it on to Mr. Von Herman for public forum, and then we'll wrap this up for 8:30 as scheduled.
Thank you. I just want to say briefly, I am a first-generation migrant myself, and I came here legally, went through the whole shebang, became a U.S. citizen in 2016, and I don't fault anybody coming here when they were like babies and their parents brought here, but I think it is safe to say that once you're 18 years and older, you are personally responsible for your faith, including your being here legally, getting the appropriate paperwork. And I think when it comes to, and again, this is more of a comment, not a question or anything, it, in a way, for me, having to go through nearly 20 years of process to become a U.S. citizen and go through the process of legally, come here legally, to folks like me, is basically a slap in the face. Again, as I said, you know, we're all human beings. We share this planet together. You know, all of us, we are one. But when it comes to living in a sovereign territory, you know, you come from another place, and now you live in another place. I've always believed live according to how things are there. Do people think the same way you think? Necessarily not, right? And I think in a way, once you're of a certain age, you're responsible for your faith and getting things together in your life in order, as it were. That being said, folks that are hiring people who are here illegally, I think they have a certain amount of responsibility to make sure that the people that they're hiring, that they're responsible for their faith as well. In part because when somebody brings it into their life, whether it's to work on their farm or do something for them, whatever it is, and then they find out later in, you know, like 10 years down the line, or 5 years down the line, that somebody came to pick them up because they didn't have their paperwork in order, then it puts the individuals, in both the farmer and the person who's farming, both in a vulnerable positions, like what's happening, why are these people being picked up? but there's a bigger picture that is being missed that, in all accounts, that both people miss the bigger picture of getting their stuff together. One, to make sure that this person who's coming to work for you, that they're legally allowed to work for you. And number two, that, should anything happen or something goes, in the South, that they don't end up getting picked up by, in a sovereign territory, the federal government, so to speak. I'm not going to go too much into politics why the current administration is doing what they're doing or why us is doing what they're doing. Suffice to say that I think Vermonters here specifically, we're missing the bigger picture when it comes to hiring people who are having their paperwork in order, who don't have to be in a vulnerable state at all times, wondering when they're going to get picked up. Me being here legally a citizen, I feel bad for anybody who is equally a citizen or became a citizen, went through the process, that has to carry their passports all the time around. They should, period, right? If you have done your part, you should never feel vulnerable enough to live in a place, period. But suffice to say that that is happening right now in part of the atmosphere we live in. Part has been drummed up and part is true. As they say, it takes two to tango. So to just kind of wrap it up, what I'm trying to say is, I understand where our state is coming from with respect to helping people who are in a vulnerable state, who don't have their paperwork together yet. But I think also we're not dealing with toddlers, we're dealing with grown-ups, people who are old enough to take care of themselves. So if I have a business and I want to run it, I want to make sure that people have their stuff together, where in the future, I don't get into trouble for having them around me, and I don't want them to get into trouble for them being around me to do some work, period. So that's where I'm looking from. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you. I would just say that there is a concern where we know that ways that people can legally enter our country have been dismantled. We know that the Trump administration did that. We also know that people are literally being picked up at their hearings. So while I completely respect the freedom of speech, it doesn't match the reality of what is happening here. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
To kind of bounce off of what you were saying, because I'm first generation. So I'm first generation, so we have a lot of friends who also are immigrants. And they've run into that same situation where they're either carrying their passports or they're not traveling at all right now. So they're keeping a very low profile. And they work in professional situations. They're like doctors. So they're in very high concern positions of like what's gonna happen with my job. So I think there does need to be some training that needs to be considered and looked at more closely on how people work with meeting people and questioning people and things like that, because I think that's where sometimes we're getting ourselves into trouble when we're looking at a person and passing judgment, and it's not being handled well. And I can even remember a time when I went to cross into Canada with my stepmother, who has a very strong accent, and we had different last names, and we got questioned like hardcore. And she had an American passport, and they were like, "Well, where are you from?" And it was like, "You're questioning us on this? Seriously?" So there needs to be better training in place and maybe standardized questions that are not invasive.
Well, great. I think we must be getting pretty close to the end of time, and I just want to thank everybody that came out. It's been a great conversation, and everybody, including everybody that's watching on the live stream or However that's broadcast, always know that I have an open door and I love hearing from Vermonters, so thank you.
Governor Rodgers, thank you everyone for coming out tonight for the NPA. We do appreciate it. You could have done any number of things on Wednesday evening, but you chose to be here, so thanks for that. Until next time, our next meeting is June 3rd downstairs in Contest Auditorium. Take care.